Adventure Ho, Lumineers, and welcome back to another episode of Ducktail Dads. My name's Ryan. I am joined, as usual, by Nathaniel and Mack. Welcome to the podcast, fellas. Today, we're talking about an upcoming unique way to play, unique format to play this game. And we're also talking about a little bit of, some barriers to entry or possible barriers to entry. We'll have a little discussion about it. It'll be interesting to see what y'all think about it. This what a question was kind of brought up to me by my wife, thinking about the new set and new mechanics, and so I'm interested to hear y'all's takes on it, and can't wait to get into it. But first, as we always do, let's start with what's new in your world. Nathaniel, what's new in your world?
Well, I'm not on a Disney Lorcana trading card game front, but on another front, for the second time ever, sent in some cards to be graded. And I think I had mentioned this sometime like a while ago, how this is something that you can evaluate as a trading card player if you have a high value card and you want to really preserve that card. You kind of immortalize the condition of the card by getting it graded, and they put it in this nice slab, and it stays that condition foreseeably forever. So I did that about 2.5 months ago, and I got my cards back. And it was very cool to get my first ever PSA 10 Pokemon card back, and that was a Charizard from the Celebration set, which feels kind of cool as like a millennial dad, right? Like Charizard's kind of like the OG. So to have a PSA 10 of that in any format, like this is technically a reprint card, funny on the heels of Fabled. It was a reprint for the 25th anniversary 4 years ago. Of the original base set Charizard card. So really cool for any Pokemon stands out there, or just really in general, maybe people who are enthusiasts about graded cards. I was actually talking to Ryan about this over the weekend, and we don't talk like a ton about card value necessarily on this, and we don't give out any financial advice on this podcast. But like, it's kind of crazy if you pull like an Elsa Enchanted, for example, right? That's this game's version of the Charizard, right? The card right now is selling for about $800. I think roughly in that realm. If you get a PSA 9, which is the second highest grade that you can get from that particular grading company, the card value goes up to like $950. So it gains like a little bit. If it gets to a PSA 10, which is considered like pristine, gem mint, like the highest grade you can get, the card doubles. So you pay $20, you probably pay some insurance to get the card back because now it's a pretty expensive card. But you end up paying probably somewhere between $40 and $100, and you turn your $800 card into a $1,600 card because now it's a PSA 10 or a Gem Mint 10. It could be CGC, it could be Beckett. There's a couple different grading companies out there. And it's just an interesting thing that I think makes my mind kind of whirl when I get a really good card. Like, ooh, is this worth it? Because there is some long-lasting value there as a collector. And as Ernie has told us before, it is extremely dangerous to be both a collector and a player of a card game. So, Mac, that probably describes you pretty well. But, I think it was kind of cool to get one back that was in great shape. So, that was probably the biggest thing from new in my world outside of Lorcana. From a Lorcana perspective, we'll talk about this later on the pod, but I am super excited for my first sealed event since Arcasia, I think. I want to say since Arcasia. So it's been quite some time since I've played sealed. It's actually been 4 months since I've even been at a local Lorcana event, which feels crazy to say. So I'm really excited for that. That's upcoming this next weekend. So getting prepared for sealed, which, unlike constructed, means I don't have to do anything. I just have to show up and make my deck. So from a getting prepared perspective, it's just getting registered. With that, I'll pass it to you, Mac. What's new in your world, man?
Don't forget the sleeves, though. You always need the sleeves when sealed, just in case you pull some heat during the sealed event. Yes, very much excited for that sealed event that you mentioned and you alluded to. Talk a little bit more about what that's going to be about. Because like you, I think the last time I did sealed was the same Arcasia's event where Evan, a friend of ours in the group, pulled the Tamatoa, and at the time everyone was so jazzed that was the thing, right? Pre-Hiram ban, and that was the $60 card of the set. What's new in my world? Not much from like a Lorcana perspective. In terms of gameplay or like deck building. Mine is I have a couple shout outs. So I wrote them on my list here. I want to make sure I do some shout outs for my What's New in My World. First and foremost, my birthday brother, Lance. This past week, Lance and I have been texting back and forth when it comes to cards I'm interested in this set. He tends to be one of the guys that I search for singles throughout our local community here. And so I sent him a list probably on release day, maybe the day after, of ones just to be on the lookout for. Didn't know if I was ready to pull the trigger just yet because I was still narrowing in on a deck that I wanted to do. On Friday this past week, a mystery gift showed up in my mailbox. And at first I was like, what the heck is going on? But then I noticed a very familiar address. Not going to say that out loud here because that would be a little safety concern. But and it was an address that I recognize of purchasing cards before. So Lance had sent a birthday care package to me of some of the cards that were on that list. Obviously lower value, but very much key cards in the type of decks that I want to build. So shout out Lance. You didn't have to do that. Very gracious of you. I'm very happy to have met you through this game and continuing to watch our friendship, blossom. So thank you so much. That goes a long way, even those smaller acts of kindness. So I very much appreciate that. Secondly, there's a new store in town. It's been around for about a year, but the first time I attended it was actually today, and that's Escape Odyssey in Elk River. I met the owner there, Chris. So that's my shout out. Chris, very nice guy. We talked a little bit about what he wanted to do in the business. It's not only a game store, but it's also an escape room. He's got a couple of escape rooms, which is really fun. And he had a couple extra cases. And I know Whispers in the Well has been a hot commodity in the community. So he held a case for me for 48 hours and kept it for me. And now I am a proud owner of a case of which our friend group will be splitting and using to see what heat we can pull, and maybe one of us will get an iconic. So shout out Chris. I will definitely visit your store in the future, and I've already notified these Ducktail dads about it too. So I'm sure all of us will be on our way in the near future as well to your stores. Shout out Chris. And lastly, to you gentlemen, you also gave me a birthday present. My other What's New in My World is that we attended, Ryan and I met at Connor's house this past weekend to celebrate his twins' 2-year-old birthday. They had a friend birthday party. I know, Nathaniel, you wanted to make it. Your family wasn't able to make it due to some sicknesses that I think all of us are experiencing at some point this fall. But during there, Ryan slipped me a card, and when I opened it at home, it was, you guys are graciously covering the cost on my end of this upcoming sealed event. So very much thankful and grateful of not only our friendship, but your kindness as well. So it's kind of amazing how, like, Ryan, I haven't even known you a year, and now, like, we've formed a really good friendship. Nathaniel, just over a year. Same thing. We formed a really strong friendship. So this game not only has brought some joy in just gameplay, but friendships along the way too. So thank you guys. Those are my shout outs. That's kind of the What's New in My World. So thank you to all. And Nathaniel, looks like you have something going on.
Yeah, sorry, Ryan, before you go, I do want to also tack on to that. Our resident Scrooge McDuck and our friend Evan also went in on that, knowing that, Mack, you have not attended as many events as you would have liked the last couple sets, dating all the way back to Jafar, which I know was one that you were very excited for. So it's so great to have that large community that we have in Minnesota, but also really nice to have a tight-knit community that we have as the friends that kind of got into this game as we continue to branch out further and meet other great people like Lance. Pretty amazing. And yeah, I'll double down on Escape. I've actually been there as well and had just kind of said, how cool would it be to go to like a Lorcana event there, whether it be a weekly, a set chance or something, and then like also do an escape room with some people? Like, your brain's probably totally fried by the end of that, but that'd be super fun. But yeah, just wanted to include those other two in there as well. I'll kick it to Ryan.
Yeah, so I guess I owe Mac a little bit of an apology. It was a bit of a misstep on my part, miswriting on my part, and miscommunication. And now it's coming full circle where it was Mac said to thank you to all of us, and then I sent Mac a message like, hey, by the way, I messed up, but it's just Nathaniel and I, and then evolved from there since then to now all four of us are splitting it. So love to celebrate you, and we know this is something that you'd enjoy. So it's an easy present, easy gift to give. Always happy to celebrate a friend. I'm new in my world. We are fighting a good fight against box elder bugs. So we sprayed some insect spray, I suppose, outside our house around a lot of our windows. They like to collect and try to come inside. Fighting the good fight here as winter approaches, and we are trying to gear up for the next warm day for us to spray a second round. And then on the Lorcana front, just been enjoying Whispers in the Well. A lot of great fun new cards, a lot of great fun new deck builds. I think I have like 6 or 7 just like brewing in the background, ready to go. I haven't been able to test much, but just trying to get my hands on some cards and do that whole song and dance. It's been fun to pack rush with my wife. Again, that's our favorite way to open things, and just shuffling up and dealing things, and then all of a sudden you deal a hand of 5 and you look like, oh, like there's a Cinderella in there. This is really cool. This is probably not as great in this setting, but I'm glad I have this. And it's just this like shock and awe moment of, all right, I just shuffled up a Cinderella with no sleeves on. Great, love it. Can't wait to shuffle up an Enchanted or something like that, hopefully someday. But yeah, that's what's new in my world. You guys, we've alluded to it many times in the first 12 minutes of this podcast. The new event coming up, or the event that y'all are attending this coming weekend. So it's a team sealed event, which is 2 layers to that, right? The sealed layer is 6 packs, create a 40 card deck. The team side of it is that it's actually a 3-person team, if I'm not mistaken. And across the 18 packs, you create 3 decks of 40. So extra high powered decks are going to come to the forefront. Interested to hear y'all's thoughts on initial strategies. Is it just a pile everything into one deck and make the other 2 decks work? Really pile everything into 2 decks and make the 3rd deck just like do your best, buddy? Or what is the strategy here? Just keep all your decks separate and just say, we're gonna have a good time. We each get 6 packs and we each make a 40 card deck. What are y'all's thoughts, and what are y'all excited for most going into this team sealed event?
So this actually, we caught wind of this a few weeks ago and have been learning exactly how the format will work over the course of the last week or so. And this is one thing where the part that I think I'm most excited about, Ryan, you touched on a little bit, is the fact that the power level of the deck probably much greater than your usual sealed experience. And the reason for that is when you think about opening, in a draft, right? It's like 4 packs or so. If it's a sealed event, like standard sealed, it's going to be 6 packs, so 72 cards. Like you can create some decent synergies there and like kind of do some cool stuff, but your card pool itself is just very limited. And that's really fun for that reason. But the way that this format works is you and your 2 teammates, you each open your 6, but then of those 216 cards now, you get to make your 3 decks. And so, to your point, you can really, if you're only needing to make a 40 card deck out of 216 cards, there's just so much more like available to you to make a really, really good deck. I think one thing I'm really interested in that I think at least one deck could build around is detective synergy. That seems to be one that there is a ton of in this set, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit more, specific cards, but there's plenty of synergy there within just this particular set, so I think there's options there. There's, you can still build like good like sealed decks that just make a lot of sense, and I think because you have that many cards, you can afford like one person to have like the super synergy detective deck, and then maybe other 2 have like decent decks, but the same rules still apply as far as the actual, like, the sealed deck itself. It can be all 6 ink colors. It needs to be 40 cards. And you can distribute the cards however you want, like, after or whatever the event. I think something that we talked about for our group is you would open your packs and then, like, take a picture of the cards that are yours, and then we'll just mix them all up and make the decks from there, so we don't get anything kind of mixed up. So that's actually really cool. There's actually, for anyone who's listening this prior to Sunday the 23rd, there is still a couple spots available for this. But yeah, the ideal I think number they want to get to is 3-person teams, 8 teams. So your standard Swiss, you would you'd have 4 1-0 teams after the first round, and you'd have like 2 2-0 teams going into round 3. So there would be like one team at the end of the event that like is 3-0 and like wins the event. So as far as the actual matchup, I haven't totally heard back on like how that exactly works, but what I am assuming what will happen is you each line up against a person from another team, and if you win 2 of those 3 individual matchups, you like win the round, right? So like if I were to win and Mack were to win, and then our buddy Connor were to lose. Sorry, Connor, no shade to you. But like if he were to lose, like we would win that round still because we won 2 of the 3 like individual matchups. So I think that's how it's going to work. But we'll definitely learn more as we get closer. I think it's just going to be really cool to do a new type of sealed event, right? Because we've talked about how just it's an already new skill set to try to figure out how to play draft for the first time, how to play sealed for the first time, what cards are good, what cards are kind of buns. And this will be cool to see how it's different when the card pool is even greater, and you've got 2 other minds to help you build the deck, right? Like you get to build your decks like together. So I think that's really, really fun. And I hope that we get some, if we don't pull any heat, I hope that we at least get some cool like synergistic decks that can do some fun and hopefully broken sealed things.
Yeah, that's a good point, Nathaniel. And I'm glad you're coming into the mindset of this event from a synergistic point of view. I think what I am most thinking about is that over the course of the last couple sets when we have done sealed, and most notably when I've been a part of like the Cube, for example, that I've referenced at the second anniversary event, that's not sealed, it's draft style, but it's still a limited format, right? I feel like I've gotten better at the limited game style. And with that, I think I can bring some of the, at least, because during the Cube specifically, I was able to pick the brains of Christian and Zach, and Ernie on like how to build good limited decks. And I think I can bring that experience and that knowledge to this format for me, you, and Connor specifically. Whereas you're coming in from the synergies, and then Connor is just so good at just random deck ideas that I think he'll be able to fill those gaps. Avenues that are unexpected, and the surprise factor, he does very good at that when building decks. So I think from those 3 angles, and I'm anticipating we'll do pretty good. I think it's going to be the explanation in terms of how the deck will work, in terms of like we line up against one opponent, probably a best of 3, or maybe we play one of each. I don't know how that's going to work, and then one game of each, and then you'll just add up the total game score, and then the best game score moves on. Who knows? Either way, I'm very excited to see how that looks. I forget who's putting it on. I think is it Rob? I guess I don't remember who is putting it on.
Yeah, so another good opportunity to probably provide a shout out. Rob, he often organizes events at The Source in Roseville, Minnesota. Shouts to him. Any event that he's ever put on that I've been a part of was run very well, and he's very passionate about the game. So he's kind of he's partnering, I think, with Modest Brewing.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, butchered it. But Modest Brewing, Modest Brewing, putting this on, super cool, and Rob, an amazing person in the community, both from just like a lot of positive energy for the game and very welcoming person. And I've seen him interact with younger players, and I think he is very exemplary in how you bring people into this game, no matter their experience. And just try to focus on like making this fun. So shouts to him for helping organize this. It's going to be really exciting. I believe Christian and Hannah are also going to be there. I think they've done it in the past.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I was like, that's going to be our opponents, right? Is the young family. So
I know
there are going to be some good players there. So we'll have our work cut out. And I know Christian has been putting on his videos for Team Arcana. Shout out Team Arcana. I know he's been doing streams on it and like how to best build limited decks in this format specifically for set 10. So if you haven't caught that, I think there's a video out there. But yeah, I mean, he's obviously a really skilled player, and he's been doing his homework specifically for this set too. So we'll see how it goes. They're very good players, but I think we'll be okay, and we've gotten better at these limited formats as well. So I'm curious, Ryan, if you have any tips for us as we prepare for this event, specifically for Whispers cards that we should look out for, in your opinion.
Yeah, David Xanatos, a super rare ruby card. I think it's a 5/5, 6 cost inkable, where one it has 2 lines of text. First line of text is whenever one of your characters is banished on your turn, draw a card, and then you can quest and give something rush. So it really turns a lot of like your little cards into card draw later in the game. When you like play a card, quest with him, rush in like a 3/1 into something else that has some damage thing on your opponent's board just to clear one of their big characters. The other big tip is stats matter. Stats matter a lot this set, and the stat thresholds have significantly changed. So keep that in mind as you're going through things, and don't be afraid of the gargoyle stone by day because it does not matter in limited because you don't have enough cards in your hand. I don't think there's any way for you to get enough cards in your hand for that to matter, unless your opponent drops a Demona on you, which is highly unlikely. Um, just know that like the stone by day is largely non-existent. It matters for like turns 3, 4, 5 to like, do I really want to attack with this character? But otherwise, like you don't have to worry about it. And their stats are so big anyways that if they're trading into you, it probably doesn't feel that bad because they're probably not trading anything super small into you. But yeah, so stats matter. That David Xanatos card draws a lot of cards, and otherwise card draw and evasives and all the standard sealed things still apply. Just that the bodies are much bigger, a lot bigger bodies. That 2 cost Iago Challenger 5. That's a nice trade up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think too, one thing that I've been super excited, at least when this event was announced a couple weeks ago that this was happening, we alluded to it about DLC Milwaukee, is we didn't get to do our team trios event at Milwaukee because I did so well in Infinity. Am I right? No, but we just didn't have the time to do it, and I know we were pretty jazzed to do it. It's not the exact same thing because with that you had to use all 6 inks core constructed deck, and try and duel it out that way. This one is limited, where no ink restrictions, right? And it's more in a sealed atmosphere. But I think we liked that idea of linking up together and trying to face a kind of a team format. And ever since that, I've been really curious to do something like this. And I think this is just kind of the right time, right place that it's worked out. And I'm excited to be a part of it and just see what it's about, to have some sort of team in a very much a single player game, a team aspect, because I know the three of us, as we spoke to before, we grew up with traditional sports, so we're very familiar with what it's like to be a part of a team and kind of cheering on your teammates as you're trying to battle it out together. So that's, I think, at least from my perspective, that's something that I'm excited about too, just bringing back those childhood memories of being a part of sports teams as well.
And I think, Mac, one thing that we'll have to also figure out, if it is truly that format of like you line up against one person from the other team and you play them best of 3, I'm very curious if, because this is a team event, say Connor wins a quick 2-0 match, right? Can he sit next to me, look at my hand, and coach me, right? Like, he's not sitting across, he can't see their hand, right? He's sitting next to me. Is he allowed to talk through stuff with me right there, like on the table? Or is that still kind of like, the actual games themselves are still truly 1v1, right? Like, I'm very curious about how some of that will play out. I wouldn't be surprised if it was still kind of like, hey, it's still just like mano a mano. But like, that could be really interesting too. And even if that is even the case, I'm still just excited for even just the deck building phase where we're building decks as a unit. I think that itself will be really fun to like throw ideas back and forth with this creative task. So you guys can probably tell me like, yeah, that would be amazing if it worked, and it won't, or maybe it happens one time all day, so you're not going to do that trash combo. or something like that. But yeah, I will say this though: if we pull any David Zanatos's, Mac, you have to put those in your deck because I can't run that guy. He is the gargoyle villain, and as a gargoyles fan through and through, not sure I can run that guy. For the first time ever, I'm gonna hold to the lore.
Oh darn, you'll just play the Goliath.
Does that also mean you're not playing
Who also just gets buckets. Oh yeah, tough. She might have to be played, especially because she's purple. So maybe she just she's like an exception to my weird rule.
Huge conflict of interest is Demona for you.
No, all jokes aside, I still am just so happy that Gargoyles is in this game. It was just a franchise that I don't think people really ever talk about much at all. And for me, at least as a kid, like I was so enamored with this for a time, and I think it's so cool that it's in this game, and they're also good. So that's really neat.
So two last notes on this Team Sealed thing. The one is that there's another store that we forgot to shout out during the intro to it. Mantle Collectibles, which I believe is newer to the Lorcana scene, is partnering with Rob to provide support for and also be a vendor on site at Modest Brewing on day of the event. So that's a really cool thing that they're doing for the community. And then the second piece is adding to that list of must play cards if you do pack them in your 6 packs or 18 packs. The 6 cost Little John that has boost, the 4/5 quest for 3 with boost 3. It just runs away with games. So include that in your decks. Find a way to drop that late in the game, and you are sailing to victory. Even if you're down a bunch of lore, he just quests for so much lore in such a short amount of time. It's unreal. So those are two last notes. Any last notes from y'all before we move on to the next topic?
I'll say one thing, and I don't think this will be the way that the format is, but there was a small part of me that kind of wanted the format of the game itself to just be a single, first to 20, but all 3 people have to get 20, and it's like multiplayer. So like 2v2 multiplayer, but extend it to 3 people, and then you could like really do some crazy stuff. Like imagine the gargoyles, right? Like because it's everyone, right? Drawing 2 or whatever. Like some of these like all players do something just become like absolutely crazy. I think that would be really really fun, and maybe something that like we could look at just trying to play one time ourselves. We could pull Lance in for our 6th. I don't know. But like do some 3v3 at some point in that format and see how absolutely busted and insane the matchup is. Where it's still like each person has to get 20 to win. And that's why I think you just probably do best of 1, because that game would take like 40 minutes. That singular game. Yeah. We can move on, but I think last note on that is I think that would be a really cool format. I don't think that's what's going to happen on Sunday, though.
All right, Mac, anything to add? Yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, shaking the head.
I'm good.
So next thing wanted to chat about with y'all is barriers to entry to Lorcana. So we all got in the game a year or more ago. When I joined at least, I didn't feel like it was this like super high barrier to entry, both from complexity or from cost standpoint. And now with Whispers in the Well introducing even more mechanics, now we're playing with your base vanilla cards. You have evasive, you have ward, you have locations, you have items, you have songs, you have just actions, the difference between actions and songs. Now you have whispers that have the boost mechanic, and you have the bounce characters. There's like multiple layers of complexity, which is what makes the game fun. Also makes it complex to try to teach to a new player. And so we've talked about how to introduce new players to the game previously. So my first question to y'all, with the introduction of the whispers mechanics and the new set and the new cards, do you feel like the barrier to entry in terms of complexity of the game has risen to a significantly higher level, to where it's much harder, much more difficult to introduce the game and game mechanics to new players? And we can kind of take that in 2 different chunks, one for like a young player chunk and one for like a peers or an older player chunk. Somebody that may not have experience with Magic, but just has experience with board games or in general, and then somebody that is, on the younger side, this is their first experience or foray into board games, trading card games, that kind of thing. So is the complexity too high now since Whispers introduced the boost mechanic and all these other unique, and the Stone by Day thing, and drawing and discarding and exerting, all that information, all those new mechanics? What are y'all's thoughts?
Yeah, I can take a stab at this first. To answer like simplistically, yes, I think the game is harder to learn now than when it was first released. I think that's kind of a no-brainer in a sense that like there are just way more mechanics now than even the first three sets that were introduced. I think we alluded to it at our hype episode for this set. We talked about how like over the course of Lorcana's history, it's been like every 2, 3, 4 sets, there have been something like massive that kind of overhauls the game. It started first with Inklings in the sense that locations were introduced. Then we had Sing Together, which was a big thing. We moved into Duo Inks. And then things like, the boost and the whispers. So there's been a lot that's been going on that's happened over the course of the career, and they've just been introducing not only keywords, mechanics, and just even new cards, right? So in that aspect, yes. However, what I do appreciate with Ravensburger is that I think they planned for this with Fabled. These games, from what I've learned, like this is all our first true TCG that we've been a part of, but in talking with players of the community that have been a part of other TCGs, these games are very much 1-2 years ahead of where we're at currently in terms of a game development side. So whereas we're just upon release of set 10, Ravensburger's probably mapped up to like sets 16, 17, 18. And so throughout all that play testing, they have an idea of what the meta is going to be. They have an opportunity to balance everything properly in anticipation for when they need to get to the final check mark to then print the cards. Everything should be relatively balanced. And to this point, Ravensburger's done a very good job at doing that. We only have 2 ban cards out of 2,000 plus. So like their hit rate is very good in the sense of not getting rid of cards because they're too overpowered. And everything changes every 3-4 months anyways when a new set is released, right? And so this long explanation is to say that when sets 2 or 3 were coming out and they were planning 4 or 5, 6 sets ahead, they knew that the barrier to entry could have reached a breaking point. And that's why they introduced rotation, I think, so early compared to other TCGs. To my knowledge, Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, like the rotations were a lot like slower to come about. Ban lists were a lot slower to be implemented than Lorcana. And I appreciate the proactive attitude that Ravensburger has taken when getting ready for all the planning that they have to do. So with that, I think Fabled was a perfect example of their goal was to get not only to recycle the meta, right, but to have another opportunity for new players to join the game. That was one of their primary goals with Fabled. And then now with that, it almost feels overwhelming, even for like what I would call us veterans at this point in the game. Like, I don't know about you, but Whispers felt a little overwhelming just seeing 200 plus cards again. Like learning 200 plus cards as opposed to 30 something new cards. It was like, wow, there's a lot to learn when a new set comes out, right? And when there are a lot more gaps in the game, there are a lot more opportunity to fill those gaps with those 200 plus cards, as opposed to like when set 7 or 8 came out, all the best cards were in the first 4 sets. So it's like you really only put 1 or 2 cards in, and that's all you cared about. Whereas this one, you're putting in nearly 50% of your deck is now new, or there's a new style with this Whispers. So yes, I think now with that too, it provided an opportunity for new players. But now as we get into the next 2 or 3 sets, the learning curve to realize to just learn cards, because we haven't needed to learn as many cards adding to our meta decks in the past. I think that can be overwhelming. So I'm gonna take that 10,000 foot view perspective. Like over time, I think it'll get easier as we move up to the next rotation, and then the next 4 sets it'll get easier until the next rotation where there'll be another learning curve. I think it'll always be the set after the rotation set will always be the highest learning curve set, in my opinion, because there are a lot more gaps to fill. I'll let you guys speak to like the specific mechanics, because I have now rambled a lot. So it's your turn. Who's next?
I think so. My perspective of kind of like rotation and like what it does for the game is I do think it, while it does on one hand open the door for people to kind of come in somewhat at like a good point of entry, it does also make it, and I think I referenced this on our last podcast, but like it does make it this continued pressure now to get more and more cards from each new set, because of the fact that they will now have such a bigger impact, right? Like I referenced on the last one that like you could go from set 7 to 8 and potentially play the same set of 60 cards if you really wanted to. And you could still do that, but you could be like pretty meta relevant and do that, or just change in a couple cards and stay very meta relevant. And on the flip side of this coin of like freshness of a new meta that is introduced because of rotation, it then puts even more pressure on you to like go find these cards. And I think, yes, that certainly was true for like super powered cards in the Fabled meta, but like even this, right, you're seeing how many new cards are coming out that are going to be high impact ones, and specifically how many of those are legendary. It's good for like card value, and that it's probably good for the game, but it does make it like there is some additional pressure there now. Like I'm definitely feeling it from a decision making perspective, right? Like scale back the opening of sealed product so I can allocate those funds to the specific good cards I want for my constructed deck. Whereas with Arcasia, right, I just need to go get 4 to 6 cards, and then I can have some fun just like playing, more sealed events or opening up more sealed product, get a booster box, right? And maybe I'm just trying to be very strict about like the budget I allocate to the game. But I think that's something that is to be considered. Like with the rotation, you do kind of put additional pressure on the player base to constantly be, fishing out all of these really meta-relevant cards, because with each new set, because the card pool is now smaller, you're just inevitably going to release, unless they release bad cards, which I don't really see that happening, particularly on the heels of the Whisper release, right? There's so many good cards. That's exciting, but also in some ways intimidating. I think this kind of gets us a little bit into this piece. And before I ramble on too far, I should probably let Ryan speak to this, because this is actually a relevant topic for me from a teaching perspective. Okay, Ryan, you said I'm good. I actually did talk with some of my coworkers about like an event we're going to put on at work with like teaching things, some skills and this, and they found out that I play Lorcana, and I got voluntold to teach the game to people if they want to come in. So I'm going to hold a session where, over like a lunch hour, where you can come learn how to play Lorcana with me. And, I think if you do this like a year ago, it's like relatively easy to explain. And now it's like, how far into this do you really want to get when you're teaching someone how to play the game, right? Like we talked about the introduction of new mechanics with every released set. Like, do you have to explain to a brand new person the boost mechanic, or do you just wait until a card gets played that says boost and then talk about like what that actually is doing? Because there's so many things, I think, with like the general, like when I think about like if someone didn't know anything about the game, like you're going to talk about the base layer stuff. Got to be at least 60 cards, limited to 2 ink, the whole altering phase, right? Like first person can't draw, second person gets to draw, right? Like some of the very like just like the most basic things. And then I'd almost just want to like play a game after just describing like ink versus unink, and then like ink and play, and then just characters, items, locations, right? And then from there, like once you're actually like playing the game itself, then you can start talking about the text on the cards themselves, where then you're going to talk about bounce, reckless. When a card says the little ink symbol here cost 3 or less, it can exert to sing the song, right? Like, you're describing that for the very first time. Like, for us at this point, it feels like second nature, but I almost want to like describe all of that stuff like while you're playing the game itself. And I think it's kind of like how I did when I first taught our friend Joey how to play the game about 7 months ago. And it seemed to work that way, right? Like, he kind of figured it out, so then we played a second game, and he was just kind of slapping down cards. Now, granted, more mechanics have been released since then, but I think there are some that it just kind of takes playing the game. Otherwise, you're going to spend 30 minutes describing every little thing, and it's all going to feel like theory, right? And yeah, maybe that's the like I learned by doing in me, but I think that at a certain point, you just want to get like the standard mechanics down first, and then we'll start getting into all the like advanced stuff that's happening on the cards. I mean, don't even get me started on all those blue decks and their ramping business. But I'm curious from your guys' perspective, right? Like, if you were to bring someone brand new into the game, you know, like Ryan, you brought your wife into the game a couple sets ago now, right? And you know, she's learned how to play. But Mac, I'd be curious, if you were going to bring someone in at this stage, would you follow a similar kind of outline that I just described, or would you go about it slightly differently?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And as you were explaining that kind of triggered a couple thoughts on how I would teach a new person, because I have not had that opportunity. Before I do that, I do have to mention this now, because we do post the videos of this. Ryan will be back. He's going to reconnect. We'll be there in a second. But to continue on your point, teaching a new player, I don't want to sound too harsh. So I'm going to start what I would do first, and then I'm going to then elaborate on what I'll call the common sense, right? What do I do first? How I learned was learning the 4 steps of your turn. Ready, set, draw, play. So just get into that rhythm. So when it's your turn, ready all your cards. Set, which means play any beginning of the turn actions or cards that trigger during that set phase. Draw for turn, and then play. And then the play is very much just play anything you want in any order. Just make sure that the cost you see in the top left matches what you have in your inkwell. With that being said, you're only allowed to ink once per turn, just in a standard turn. That's kind of where I would start. So that's kind of the base level. Then I'm going to get into the common sense. Take the card description and what it says on the card literally. That's how I learned. And definitions of words make sense, like how you would interpret them in the English language. Like, when you play this card, you may do this. May, you can interpret that as I can do it or I can't do it. So take it literally. Or if a card says, when you do this, then this happens, you have no option. There is no decision to be made. You have to, if you do this, then you do that. So I think reading the cards literally is how I learned the game. So I think of Sail the Azurite Sea as a blue player, right? Play this card, you draw a card, so it forces you to draw a card. Then you may ink another card. So it's kind of gives you those options with the may effect, but it also has that effect where it kind of forces you to do something by playing that card. That's how I would start with a new player. And I think using that like common sense, read the card literally and do as it says literally, can be applied to anything. Like Rush, for example. I think one thing I forgot to mention was within the basic rules, I would also explain, like, once you play a character, you can't do anything with it the turn you play it. But if you play an item, you can activate it right away. And then actions, you just do what the action says. Kind of the 3 basic cards. And then locations, right? Locations are something I'd probably start in like phase 2 of my explanation. But then like Rush, do it literally. When you play it, you can also challenge your turn. So it avoids kind of the wet, aspect of the game, but only for challenging. So I think once you get into the flow of like just getting past kind of like, are you sure you can do it this way? Or are you sure you can do it that way? I think once you start teaching the individual, like, just read the card literally and it just do as it says. In more of a common sense way, I think that's how I would go about teaching it that might be a little bit more brutal compared to how other people would teach it. But I think what people get so anxious about in learning new games is like overwhelmed with just the amount of words on a piece of cardboard rather than taking a deep breath and just taking it line by line. If I do this, I have to do this. If I do this, I may do this. So therefore, I don't have to if I don't want to. Kind of things of that nature. And once they understand the verbiage, I think the rest kind of opens up itself in terms of how to interpret other cards that other card mechanics, like boost is the new one, this one, right? Or evasive or things like that. So I think that's how I would teach the game. In terms of how I would specifically teach a new player. Is that how you've kind of done it, Nathaniel, when you taught, you mentioned a friend of yours, Joey, like, or just other people in general? Is that kind of something that you've learned, or how have you learned throughout the way when you've taught other people?
Yeah, so I think all great points, and like the kind of read what the card says, do as much as you can. I think there's also a way to do this where you can curate the decks that you're going to play such that the game itself is more simple, right? Like, we're not even getting into some of the more advanced mechanics where it's like, active player resolves first, or all these things go into the bag. Like, you get to decide the order in which they happen, right? Like, you don't have to do that when someone's being introduced to the game for the first time. So, like, you could just take cards from primarily like sets 1, 2, and 3 and just choose like more simple cards from that list and just try to get them to learn the basic mechanics of like ink and play and challenge and or sing, and like you're trying to get to 20 first, right? And you could even just like not even do items, not even do locations, and just make it like a character battle with maybe some songs thrown in or something and actions. And I think like that's how you could sort of like, pun definitely intended, ramp them up in terms of like their ability to like understand that there are like more layers to this, but just at least get kind of the general sense of the game of like you're drawing cards, you're inking, you're playing cards, you're interacting with your opponent's side of the board, and when you get to 21st, you win. And then you can start getting some of those more advanced things where you're, there's just so many cool things I think about this game now that we're talking about this more in depth, right? Like, so many unique cards, vision of the future where you're grabbing 5 and grabbing specifically one of those, like all these different ways of skill expression that happen over the course of a game. And boost being another one of those, I think, of like testing how you do that, when you do that. I think that's really exciting in a lot of ways. But I think if you were trying to teach someone, you just try to distill it down to its simplest format of like, we got Disney princess cards and we're challenging each other and trying to get to 20, and just try to keep it at that as much as you can for the first phase of someone learning the game. I will say, and I think Ryan's a very smart person, so he was very quick to learn the game, and already showing mastery pretty quickly. But that also I think speaks to two things: Ryan's brain and also just his level of interest in the game. So like with someone like him, you can probably just play a few rounds and introduce a new concept or multiple new concepts every couple of games. And within a week, he's pretty much like, yeah, I got it. But I think for a more casual person, I think you just think about the cards you want to actually have them play and play against and try to keep it as simple as possible there. So you're not having to be like, judge about certain things that are a little bit more complicated. Like we referenced on the last podcast, even still, more seasoned players with some of the more complicated interactions don't always get it right and would potentially interpret a card incorrectly. So, and we even did it ourselves, right? With like how the gargoyles, they cannot ready. Like you can't ready them with another effect. Like they're like stuck that whole turn. So, I think it's just, it goes to show, right, that there's two sides to that coin. It makes the game exciting, feel fresh, new, different, ever changing, but also you are making it a little bit more complicated, particularly for somebody that would be newer trying to catch up.
I think y'all made some great points. I was in and out of the actual recording piece, but I was able to listen in the whole time y'all were talking, and I think y'all made some good points about how to introduce things in a gradual process in a stepwise fashion. And when we had Christian on, who knows how long it was now at this point, but he talked about how he introduced the game to his kid and the stepwise fashion that he did that in. And he even started with even smaller decks. Like, here's a pool of 20 cards that you're going to learn. We're going to play it multiple times. Once you feel like you master it, then we'll go to a pool of 40 cards and we'll add in like one new mechanic to that pool of 40 cards. And that is from both sides of the table. So you're not playing with one super powered deck that has all the different interactions and one like very plain vanilla deck. You're playing with 2 vanilla sets of 20, and then you're playing with 2 sets of 40 that have like 1 or 2 interactions or 1 or 2 keywords, kind of layering it on there. I do think that there's multiple more steps that have been added since the new sets have been released, since we've last talked to Christian about that, in getting to that next level of understanding of the game. But one thing that I think, credit to Ravensburger, they include very clear definitions on all of their standard cards. They pare down things once you start playing some of like the enchanteds and iconics and those like higher rarities, because they're expecting that if you're playing higher rarities in your deck, you have an understanding of what that card does, and what the keywords on it mean, and so they feel like they can pare down and save space. But again, back to my previous point, Ravensburger does a very good job of laying it out very in plain English on the card, that after you have a mastery or have a grasp of how to read and interpret and apply, it's one like skill application that you can practice for little kids as they're learning to read. Like, read this card, tell me what it does and how it applies to the greater game. Like taking what you're reading on a piece of paper and applying it to a larger context. But also for adults that you're introducing to the game, it's just reading and application at that point. And so it's a skill that everybody encounters through all of their daily lives, whether you're reading manuals or reading high complexity articles online or interpreting things that someone's saying in a text message. Like, everybody's reading and applying, and so it's a very common skill. So I think for that matter, it is like at the core very easy to introduce to people, but with the extra layers of different mechanics, I think ultimately it is much more complex to try to teach to somebody, and it requires another level of like routine or repetition or commitment in order to introduce the game to a new player, or a prospective new player. I want to save a little time to get to the cost piece, because that is something that I think is important. And we talked about it. I mentioned it, I think, on the last podcast or the podcast before. Just that cost as a barrier to entry is a very real thing, and is it becoming too expensive to enter the game now? With this is the second set in a row that has had a legendary at the $60 price point or higher, with Dumbo and Fabled, and now with Cinderella and Whispers in the Well. To go along with Cinderella, now there's 2, 3, 4 maybe other legendaries that are $20 or higher per card for their just standard version of their price point. And so that's significant financial investment to get these new cards that are very strong cards, have a lot of text on them, a lot of good text. So on that point, do y'all feel like the cost barrier to entry, I know, Nathaniel, you alluded to reallocating your budgets to make sure that it works for you still. Do you feel like the cost barrier to entry is starting to creep up to a, quote, too high price point, or is it still at an attainable level for any player that wants to compete at whatever level they want to compete at?
Yeah, so I think where I'm coming from on that is I can acknowledge that we're probably spoiled in some respects from prior sets where we didn't really need to buy that many cards because there were just so many good cards already released. But I think if memory serves, a lot of other trading card games that are relevant decks tend to be fairly expensive. I think I read somewhere that, like, specifically in Yu-Gi-Oh, a lowest rarity, so think like no non-foil for all 60 of your Lorcana cards, it's the base level rarity of every card. So you're not playing enchanteds, you're not playing foils, you are playing just the lowest price point of all 60 cards that are in your deck. I think for Yu-Gi-Oh, that's like somewhere in the realm of like $700 to $1,000, which, like, I don't know if Lorcana has ever had, maybe at one point, maybe Ruby Sapphire may have hit that, or kind of close to that, just based on some of the legendaries that were in there at the time. But I don't know that any deck has ever, from a base rarity perspective, for all 60 cards, ever been much more than about $500 in this game. And that's like, you're playing the most expensive one. Where, like, we talked about this on the last podcast. Like, if it is a point where like you just don't want to, maybe you don't want to invest in Cinderellas and Goliaths to the tune of $350. You could play dogs for 90, and you still have a great deck, right? Like still tier 1, if not S tier, still level deck. Like, and just get really good at that, right? And play that for a set or two, right? So I think on one hand, it has changed, but if you take it relative to like the wider pond that is trading card games in general, it's very much like more affordable to be like a competitive player in this game if you are disciplined, right? In terms of like what you're going to play, the cards you're going to, like, yeah, it's going to be expensive if you just want to slap down enchanteds, right? Like, okay. And it's going to be more expensive if you want to like build meta decks and open tons of sealed product, right? Like, so, but I think there's a path where if you wanted to play a competitive card game and do it in a more affordable way, this probably is one of the better options. Again, we're not financial advisors, but I think relative to the other options out there for trading card games, Lorcana definitely does do well in that respect, where you can build meta-relevant things, have success, at least at the local level at the bare minimum, and not have to drop several $100s every 2 months.
I think this is a huge point, Nathaniel, that you bring up in terms of how expensive decks could be in Lorcana versus what we have for options still out there to be competitive in Lorcana. I think, to my knowledge, I'm trying to think off the top of my head here, but since I've been a part of the game, which was just before Set 3 release, the most expensive, like, non-foiled out deck, kind of your traditional bare bones deck that you alluded to, I think is the current Sapphire Steel list that is now Set 10. I think it feels like that. Is there another one this set? I don't remember, but I'm going to stick with that because that's the one I'm looking at. That one's running between $500 and $600 upon release if you didn't have a single card in that list. So thinking from the perspective of a new player who doesn't have a single card, that could be daunting, right? But I really want to hammer home your point, and I know Ryan alluded to it last week. Dogs, for example, like there are still decks out there that are around $100 that can beat the top dog, top rarity deck, top rarity meta deck in this current format, which is Sapphire Steel. So I think that's very important for people to know. If they don't have a single card, sure, maybe you're just like coming from other games, or you really like Cinderella. It might feel bad that you can't play your favorite Disney character right away, or you're used to the aspect of ramping, for example, in Sapphire. That might feel bad, but there are other avenues still there for you to at least get into the game and test it out, so to speak, before it's something you truly want to dive into and invest in, because it is an investment. Again, no financial advice, but if you're kind of on the fence, I would highly recommend, if you don't go just a simple starter deck route, if you want to get a deck to be competitive in, that's something that I think it's worth exploring, for example, is to ensure that this is something you really want to be a part of. So I think it's very important, as we were trying, I think, tiptoeing down the avenue of like, oh no, this is getting way too expensive. There are avenues where it doesn't have to be. And you can still be really good at the game. So I think that's very important for especially the new players out there post the first iteration of rotation. The cost of entry is relatively inexpensive, to your point, to other TCGs. This is still a very inexpensive TCG compared to others. That being said, that these decks are getting expensive to what I am personally used to. You talked about, and we have talked about and alluded to on numerous episodes, we're not here to give financial advice by any means, but some tips that we have learned throughout the way is the singles route versus the sealed route. The chances of pulling what you want is far lower percentage-wise than using that money to buy sealed product to open packs than to just go buy the 6 to 12 cards that you're just truly seeking. That's also an avenue that we have used in the past that has helped us manage our finances in the game as people that are frugal and want to ensure that we are spending our funds wisely when it comes to this hobby. That's something we've learned along the way. So for new players, that's definitely something I would explore. A lot of shops have just a lot of bulk bins too. If you're looking for bulk, they're very cheap, relatively inexpensive. If you want to just build up your collection, explore your local shop. And that's something that I've done when I first got into around, set 3, set 4, set 5, when I wanted to build my collection and kind of see what play styles I wanted to do. I started at those bulk bins to just get used to those different play styles, and then once I knew what I was good and what I liked to play, then I kind of narrowed my focus on those 3-4 decks, for example. That seemed to work well. This community is really great, at least in the Twin Cities area here, but from what we've heard when talking to people all around the country at Milwaukee, like, this community is very friendly and very welcoming and open and warm. Like, people want to help each other out. So if you find a good TCG, like a good shop that for your weeklies, just tell people what you're looking for. And odds are you're going to find what you need either through just friends or the shops there. Maybe people have other recommendations there. The one thing, though, I've learned specifically now on a personal front for Whispers, and Ryan and I were talking about this, I think, kind of offhand a little bit, when talking about the expense of the game, is that with Whispers specifically, one thing that we've done as well is we have learned cards that we're not going to play, we've learned to trade those away in order to obtain the cards that we do want. I think that's something that the three of us have learned along the way too. But with rotation, you need to build up your stock, right? You need to have those tradable assets. So I have taken Whispers personally as an avenue. If I don't pull the expensive cards that I don't want to play, using those as tradable assets and being okay as trading those away in order to obtain the cards that I do want, that will save some costs financially. If you go for opening the sealed route, trading, being involved more in trades rather than just purchasing, I think is a good way to save money as well, that we've learned along the way. I think it's important for our listeners, especially new listeners, to hear that. Just kind of tips we've learned along the way. By no means are they all the tips. As people who can't buy sealed product or big bulk sealed product all the time, this is what we've learned. So take it with what you want, but I'll let you guys add to it. But I think it's important that we kind of provide these tips that we've learned throughout our career as well.
I agree with what you said, Mac, that I talked about it before too, that there are inexpensive options that still are highly competitive from like a card for card sense. Maybe it's not the play style that you want. Maybe it's not exactly what you're comfortable with, but it's a chance to learn something new. And it's at the price point that you want it to be at, so you can still be involved in the game at that price point. It unfortunately then will take a little bit extra effort to learn something new and to change the style a little bit. That being said, then maybe you get lucky by going to league nights or attending set championships, or if you're able to swing a sealed event here or there, that you end up pulling some of the more expensive cards that you're looking for through those prize packs that you end up getting from those events. And so there is still a route to like efficiently gather prize packs, if you will, to make sure that this is an efficient process where you're not only spending the time to find entertainment in the game and playing the game at a price point that you're comfortable with, but then having some pack luck or having some luck to find some cards that maybe you don't want to play but are still valuable cards, to Max point, where then you could trade it for the cards that you do want to accumulate and include in your decks eventually. So there is definitely a pathway for that, and you definitely do not need to be buying the $60 legendary every set in order to be competitive, because there are plenty of other things out there, other ways out there to be competitive in the game. And I am just really hoping that the next $60 legendary is in a color that I have no interest in playing. So we'll see when that time comes if that is the case, or maybe I then get lured into those other ink colors by this shiny new object on the horizon that would be potentially there. But definitely is a pathway to play the game at the price point you want to play it at, at whatever competitive level you want to play it at, whether it's the highest competitive level at a DLC, a Lorcana challenge near you, or at the local league nights that you just are having fun attending with your friends or the friends in the community, or you're trying to meet new people. There's definitely a way to get into the game, and sometimes if you have a good shop near you or have some players near you that you start to show up to league nights and say like, hey guys, anybody have an extra deck for me? I've had that happen once or twice too, where I've just like showed up somewhere and someone's like, hey, I'm between rounds, you want to play a game? I don't have a deck, sorry, I can't help you. Well, then someone else pulls out a deck box from their bag and be like, hey, here's a random deck, good luck, go play. Okay, cool, yeah, great, I will do that. And so people are very kind and generous and welcoming and inclusive and trying to make sure that if you're there to play, that you have an opportunity to do so, whether it's with cards that you have or if it's cards that somebody's going to let you use for the day, as long as you're respectful with them throughout the night, then that's always an option too.
I'd like to say one thing too that I think is important, that is worth mentioning as well. As hard as it is, especially on release weekend of a new set, I can't preach enough patience. Like, as if you're able to wait a week or two to let more product be open into the market, or as soon as the product is released in kind of the big stores, supply increases. So when supply increases, there's less demand overall, right? Or like just overall the prices go down over a lot, like as when that supply increases. So that's something I had to learn very early on, especially when you talked about like collector and the competitor mentality. That's something I had to learn very on. Being able to trade, it's okay to trade some enchanteds. I don't need to keep all of them, only the ones that are near and dear to my heart. But waiting for the supply to increase to therefore have more available, usually speaking, except for Cinderella, because inevitably there's always one card per set that just stays high, right? Usually speaking, as the supply increases, the price of that card will go down over time. So preaching patience, waiting after release, that's another tip that I've had to learn, and I think we have had to learn as a group collectively over the course of our Lorcana journey. Even when it hurts, seeing all of our local friends pull the heat, and we just want to be a part of it. The FOMO is real, but you will get there. You will get there with your own cards eventually. So that's something I wanted to mention too before we move on.
All right, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. I'm going to have my one Poindexter moment of the podcast. As an econ major, I feel required to clarify. When there's more supply, demand doesn't actually necessarily change. It just changes the point where supply meets demand on that curve, which means you will pay a lower amount because there are more options available in the market.
Okay.
Sorry, Mac. Sorry, Mac. Any opportunity to nerd out about econ, I will absolutely take it. You said supply and demand. I had to take it. But yeah, I think it's a great point, right, about being patient. Wait for more product to come in, because inevitably, whenever there's more supply, price goes down. So that's a huge point that I think is really important. And actually, one of the measures of elasticity of demand is time. And so that means if you're willing to wait, in just generally speaking, right? If you're really like, this is where I think you also notice specific cards will sometimes spike, because if something becomes meta relevant and there's a big tournament, then it's like a card can really spike because it's like people need it and they need it now because they need to go play it in a tournament in 4 or 5 days. So I think that's the other thing, is like if you're planning out and you have some of that like flexibility there too, that can definitely matter in terms of when you actually make the purchase of the card. And that can also play into like when you trade cards, right? Like maybe you have a couple Maui Half Sharks. Now might not be the best time to necessarily trade that card, right? Because Ruby is just not that great right now. So, I think that it's worth bearing in mind. I'm not going to advise anyone. If you want to trade away any card, obviously you can do it, but there's probably times where you can sort of maximize some value there too, depending on your collection. But gentlemen, I think we should probably gear up. There was one thing we want to talk about, and I've been waiting on this for a while, and it's the surprise card of the set that you think is going to make an impact that maybe wasn't necessarily hyped, right? Like, I think everybody expected the Cinderella card and its $55 price point as of recording to be good. But what are those cards that are maybe going to surprise you? You know, it's this, like, the sneaky good ones in line with this detective theme. And I would love to start, because I have one for sealed, and I referenced this before, and I'm pretty sure I totally muffed the, like, which card it was. And then I have one for constructed that I think will actually end up being pretty good. So if you're okay, I'll start. I think the one for sealed, if you can get Detective Synergy, the Nick Wilde Persistent Investigator, extremely good card, because the text reads, during your turn, whenever one of your detective characters banishes another character in a challenge, draw a card. So if you've got a couple detectives out, and then you lay this down and make some challenges and banish some stuff, you're drawing a bunch of cards. It's really good and sealed. But the card that I was so excited to talk about as a steel player is Mayor Winddancer, actor turned politician. This guy is a 5/7 body for 4 cost. And you look at the card, you're like, 4 cost, uninkable, vanilla, can't be that great. But the reason he's uninkable is the stat line of 5/7 on turn 4 for most decks. It's really good. It's really big. It's one-shotting pretty much most things, and it's going to probably take at least 2 challenges, if not 3, to take him down, and that's a really big body to get down early. I kind of want to just, like, make this card work, because he is huge, and that will be my surprise sneak attack card for set 10. Ryan.
So, Mayor Winddancer, you don't have to make it work. It is already working in many Amethyst Steel decks from this weekend. Many of the top lists are including a couple of copies. There was a couple even that had 4 copies of him in there, and this is something that's like a mirror breaker, right? You're going to play him. He's going to survive. No one can get to 7 on that turn, unless you're playing specifically Sapphire Steel and you play Ariel and sing a song, sing Herald of Thunderbolt. Then you can get over that. But there's that's one use scenario. In every other use scenario, that card is sticking around, and then it's a reliable singer, so you can sing back on your opponent, or you can, like you said, eat up whatever you want in the opponent's field that's sideways, because it's such a big body. Great call out. Love that as a sneaky card, because that was not something going into the set that was on my radar of, like, this is like a great card, you should definitely look out for this. I would like to do 2 as well, but both of mine are going to be in the constructed realm. One is Cheshire Cat, which was coming in like, oh, it's an understated bell, but it's not, because it's repeatable, and that, I think, is a huge difference maker, that you can do it turn after turn after turn of moving all this damage, and you have this constant pressure on your opponent's board of, do you really want to turn anything sideways, because I might get 2 for 1 every single turn from here on out. So it becomes a must answer. So Cheshire Cat, that is a 3-cost inkable, 3/4, quest for 1, boost for 2, and when you boost, you took a card under the character, and when you do that, you can move up to 2 damage counters from any character to chosen opposing character, which is this constant, like, board pressure for your opponent to deal with. The other piece with that is if you have any sort of return to hand effect, where you return characters from your field to your hand, any cards that are underneath the Cheshire Cat, so if you've boosted 2 or 3 times, those also go to your hand, so then it's like this pseudo draw effect. The second card is the legendary Webby Vanderquack Junior Prospector. 4-cost inkable, 2/4, shift for 2 with ward, and whenever you quest, if your opponent has more ink than you, you can ink the top card of your deck to your inkwell face down and exerted. And a quest for 2. So you're advancing your game plan, you're getting closer to 20, you're inking and you're keeping up with your opponent, and there's sapphires everywhere in this set, so that's where this card came out of left field for me, is that there's so much sapphire that this becomes a very consistent card advantage tool or ink advantage tool to keep up with your opponent without having to ink from hand, so you get to more cards in your hand to utilize throughout the game. And so it kind of snuck up on me, but it is incredible. And it's warded, which is the other huge thing. It's a 4-cost singer that you can play on turn 2, so you can start singing Herald of Thunderbolt as early as turn 2 if you're playing green steel. It's inkable. It's warded, so your opponent can't sing on it, so you can choose when you want to expose it. If you play some sort of removal song with it, you can sing the removal song to protect it and then continue on with your game plan. Like, it's a very flexible card, and it is very effective at what it does. because it's so protected. And I think it is an incredible card that I was not expecting to see as prevalent as it is, and I think it's in just about every single green deck out there. So Webby, Vanderquack, and Cheshire Cat. Those are my two call-outs. Mac, what do you have?
I'm going to stick on the 2 train as well. And as for those of you watching the video feed, I am frantically trying to look up the name of the card. I have one of the 2 pulled up, but you guys maybe can help me with the flavor text of the second one. I'm going to actually first pull a Ruby card out of one that could be sneaky good. Now, with the caveat, I don't know if this one will be sneaky good now, but this is one that I could see have play in the future, depending on what cards are released in the future. Kind of one of those surprise ones that people lean back on. 6-cost inkable, the Hans Brazin Manipulator. I find this card extremely underrated, especially when you talk about Ruby Sapphire and trying to revive that of what it is or what it was. I can see this being in a Ruby Sapphire deck. Everyone's been talking about the David Xanatos 6-cost inkable with Ruby. I think this one is something not to sleep on in the sense that 2 abilities here. First of all, stats matter, right? 6 strength, 4 willpower, and quest for 2. First ability, King and Queen characters can't quest. First of all, very thematic. Love that. Blocks Elsa and Anna from questing, which is, I think, awesome in terms of what the Frozen franchise is all about. But I think there are a lot of prominent King and Queen characters, and preventing them from quest can slow down tempo. Very importantly, especially with Ruby, the ultimate control color that needs late game control in order to make a comeback, so to speak. But I really like its second ability. At the start of your turn, if an opponent has 2 or more ready characters in play, gain 2 lore. So I think this is kind of the double-edged sword that your opponent has to deal with, especially if you're playing an aggressive or mid-range deck. As Ruby starts taking control with this on the field, I'm thinking of my beloved Maui Half Shark, right? In a Ruby Sapphire list. It either forces, with a shark on board, forces your opponent to quest, exposing them to the Half Shark, and gain all the lore that it does with actions, or it forces those aggressive decks not to quest, which is what it wants to do, to win the game as quick as possible. So I think both things are good when this Hans is on the field. I don't, like I said, Ruby Sapphire is probably in that C tier in terms of meta viable decks right now. But as we see the resurgence of Ruby, I would assume, over the course of the next couple sets, I think this is one that people will lean back on and say, okay, the Half Shark and Hans, this is the duo that we needed, and that will feast on all of its enemies. The other one is the Mowgli. I don't remember its flavor text, but essentially it's a 2-cost character card that is bare necessities, right? And it reads, when you play this card, basically look at your opponent's hand and discard a non-character card of your choice. I think people were very nervous about where is aggro going to be, right? And this card is a card that keeps it relevant, in my opinion, especially Amber Steel. Everyone, the combination that everyone is so familiar with. We haven't seen a lot of Amber Steel success over the first 2 weekends in tournaments globally, but that doesn't mean it's not going to show up. Every set, there's a deck that comes on later in the scene throughout the duration of the set, and I think Amber Steel will be that deck that makes its resurgence, simply due to the fact that it now has a Mowgli and it has Pete to block the actions. There are now potentially 8 cards in that deck to at least stall the game even further, to let the aggro deck do what it wants to do, and that's just continue to quest as soon as possible and prevent your opponent from playing a Spooky Site, for example, or playing, the Sudden Scare card, for example, to remove those cards out of play that are from an action. So I think this Mowgli card is something to be aware of as sneaky good if you are to see an Amber Steel opponent throughout the duration of this set. Those are my 2.
Point of clarification is it's very similar to Bare Necessities. I'm glad you specifically called that out because it's very on theme and on brand for that movie, but it's actually you discard a non-character card of their choice, so the opponent gets to choose. So there is some, like, I kind of like that they went this route, right? Because then this might not necessarily help you in game one if you're going in blindly to the opponent, but you could certainly play differently knowing that you have options here. So you either have like 0 of those things, you try to go really character heavy, or you have 2. So if they get the Mowgli off, you discard the lesser impactful of the 2. If they get that specific card, versus like Bare Necessities, they get to actually select the one that they want. So this could have been their way of saying, like, let's take away a little bit of that power of Bare Necessities, but put it on a body, which we've seen them do with like many more cards too, right? That used to be like actions or songs that are now kind of built into a character. So yeah, I'm glad you called out that, and I'm glad that you're still thinking about making Ruby Sapphire relevant, Mac. I did also want to make one quick shout out. This is like super random, but Mayor Winddancer's German text is Bürgermeister Winddancer, and that makes me want to get a playset of the German card.
He's a true beefcake, for sure.
Bürgermeister, that's absolutely incredible. Sorry, I didn't mean to like pump up my own choice again, but when I saw that, I was like, that's actually amazing. So yeah, a lot of great cards, right? Like we're talking about ones that maybe were a little bit slept on, more or less, and I think you're probably going to see many of these that we referenced, at some point at an event or a locals event near you. So yeah, great call-outs, guys.
Love that. Thanks for bringing that up for us to chat about too. That was such a fun activity. With that, we're going to wrap up the podcast now as we're trending towards an hour and a half on recording time. And we are so excited that y'all were able to join us for this episode, and hopefully you got something out of it. If you have any comments you want to make, feel free to leave them down below. We're happy to see those, happy to read those, happy to respond to those, as we always are all learning together through this process of a new set and new games and 200 new cards to read and interpret and remember. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, where we upload our episodes and where you are consuming our content already. You find us on Instagram, where we'll have some posts throughout the weeks, as well as we get into opening more packs and sharing some more deck lists. We'll get that engine churning as well. Feel free to engage with us there. Otherwise, Mac, Nathaniel, love recording with y'all every week. Looking forward to next week. And without further ado, let's get the duck out of here.